I'm the first guy to pop his pecs at the One Young World Conference. I love this. Man, I got only a little bit of time, so I'm gonna get into it real fast. How you doing? I look at all these people. Man, the future is here. I love the future. First of all, I am here to basically talk about a couple things. I only have 10 minutes, so I'm gonna be really, really short, but toxic masculinity. How many of you guys have heard all that, the phrase toxic masculinity? It's been used a lot. Everybody's been talking about it, you know. Another way I like to put it is basically abusers of power, okay? You know, I came up from Flint, Michigan. I was an athlete. I played 7 years in the NFL. Flint, Michigan was a very depressed area. And I also came up in a very, very violent household. One of my earliest memories was my father, I probably was like 4 or 5 years old, my father punching my mother in the face as hard as he could. That was one of my earliest memories. And you know, through trauma, you learn your lessons. For me, it was, hey, this man, the strongest man I've ever seen, this guy, he uses his power to abuse my mother. I learned simply because I was a man, or he was a man, or the people around me who were men, they were more valuable than women. This is how it was for me coming up in Flint, Michigan. And this is funny because people say, you know, it's toxic masculinity. I mean, don't women do things wrong too and the whole thing? But you gotta understand, men and women are very, very different. One thing I noticed coming up in the hood, it was kind of wild because everyone uses their thing to manipulate people. Like, you know, women tend to be manipulated through fear. When I was coming up, the whole thing, if you were, you know, I came up in a crack epidemic where, you know, there were pimps and people who were basically treating women as property, and their whole thing was to intimidate. My father using fear to intimidate my mother. And he would basically manipulate her through fear. And I knew that, you know, guys would work games like that, you know, where they would either be physical or they would manipulate through mental means. Whereas, like, hey, you know, they would look at a girl or whatever and tell her, or their date or their wife, and tell her that she wasn't pretty enough, or she wasn't, she wasn't gonna be around much longer, or they would flirt and make her feel very, very insecure, because the whole game was that you keep the girl or woman off balance so that you never know whether you like her or not. And this was stuff that was told to me when I was a kid. That is, when I was dating, they were like, hey man, you gotta have game, you gotta do this thing. But men tend to be manipulated through pride. And pride is what is the lifeblood of toxic masculinity. Where guys are always like, hey man, I bet you won't do this. And I bet you I will. And the whole thing it's about, you know, the challenge, you know, if you ever see 5 men walking somewhere, they're probably on their way to do something really stupid. I'm just telling you, because there's nobody there to calm them down. And let me tell you something. The perfect example of toxic masculinity I can give is, let's say you have a restaurant, and a restaurant has a sign in the bathroom and it says, hey, all employees must wash their hands. But you notice when the boss comes in, who's a man, and if the boss is a guy, he's gonna come in, and you notice the boss never washes his hands. And so he goes in the kitchen, he's touching the food, he's doing his thing, and the employees are like, I don't think the boss ever washed his hands.